there was a prospective randomized controlled study of aspirin taken every other day in elderly individuals above the age of 70. And in that study, no effect on cancer incidence or death was noted. So, if anything, there was even slightly greater risk of cancer death. So there is contradictory evidence in the literature, but there was this really intriguing signal that has formed the basis for prospective randomized control studies to look at the effect of aspirin on cancer metastasis in people with early cancer without metastasis treated at the time of diagnosis.
Okay. So did you guys you saw those signals in the literature, and then did you go in with the intention of looking at aspirin here, or did you sort of go back and discover these? Yeah, was it the other way?
Yeah, I wish it was the way, but as with many scientific stories and sets of findings, we completely chanced upon this interest in aspirin and indeed in prostanoids. So we've been interested for a while in whether this vulnerable moment of cancer development, where cancer cells are metastasizing in distant tissues, when that cancer cell is a single cell in a distant tissue, latent, but the cause of recurrence, is that cancer distinctly susceptible to immune attack? And can we use that to create new therapies with dedicated anti-metastatic function? That was the idea. And so to understand the mechanisms of host immunity to cancer metastasis, we turned to this beautiful but extremely laborious study done by David Adams and his wife, Louise van der Weyden, just down the road at the Sanger, Wellcome Trust Sanger Institute. What they'd done is they'd used about 1,000, initially 810, they've expanded this study, mice that were knocked out for individual genes. So they had access to mice in which different single genes had been knocked out in host tissues. And they subjected each of these mouse strains to the metastasis assay of injecting melanoma cells directly into the tail vein of the mouse and counting them on mets that grow in the lung 14 days later. This isn't very painful or harmful to the mice. They're just little nodules that grow in the lung that can be counted after euthanizing the animal 14 days after injection. And they wanted to look at, agnostic to the genes, they were just focusing on genes with relatively uncharacterized function, at whether any genes, when lost not in the cancer cell but in the host, could either increase or reduce metastasis frequency. And the remarkable thing was most genes had no effect on cancer metastasis rate, but there was a handful, about 15 genes in their first study, whose deletion in host tissues resulted in a decrease in cancer metastasis frequency. And we started asking whether there was, material there, whether there was sort of a subject there ripe for study. So we looked through those 15 genes, and some of those stood out as potential immune regulators. And so we went for understanding what one of those genes, ARHGEF1, does.